My name is George Mancheril. I'm the CEO and a co-founder of Bespoke Financial. We are a licensed lender servicing the entire supply chain within the cannabis industry. We provide short-term working capital financing for companies that is completely non-dilutive. So we operate strictly from a debt perspective. And we feel that by offering secured debt-only financing, we're able to engage and service this industry that really doesn't have access to debt financing on a broad scale, but doing it from a responsible and secured basis by securing ourselves against the assets of the company, given that it is a nascent industry and these are new companies that are still investing in growth. My career before coming to Bespoke was the traditional Wall Street route. I grew up in New York. I worked at investment banks like Goldman Sachs, left there to go work at Guggenheim Partners Investment Management. And, I did that for over 10 years, very much enjoyed finance and looking at deals and managing risk. But I did move to LA in 2013. And so I was aware of, the cannabis industry emerging as a viable CPG industry. It's very rare that you see a brand new industry just being built from the ground up. I did also believe very strongly in the benefits of cannabis. Like most people would, knee jerk compare it to any of the vice industries out there, alcohol or tobacco. But, I personally, not just with myself, but with, friends and family that are dealing with either chronic pain or, issues like chemotherapy, I did see the relief and the benefit that it can provide. And so, the prospect of getting involved in an industry that's getting built up that I thought net was a huge value add to society just presented, I think, a very attractive opportunity at the time. And it's also very exciting, just going out and trying to build a new company from the ground up in uncharted territory. Quite honestly, that's been part of the challenge over the past almost 2 years that the company's been around. It's really translating what the value add of working from a debt perspective for your capital versus equity. I will say when the company was first founded in 2018, the equity capital markets for the industry were very, very frothy. Investors really just wanted to get some exposure. There wasn't a lot of, let's take a look under the hood and see, sort of if these investments make sense. In that environment where you just have free access to tremendous capital, and then obviously Canada legalizing and offering companies a way to RTO and list and access more capital that way, it did present some challenges initially just because, debt financing comes with terms and, there's a cost of capital that you incur right out the gate. What happened in later parts of 2019 were the equity capital markets really retrenched from the industry. And so our value proposition, I think, has just been enhanced just given the macro climate. People realize at the valuations they're getting right now, any equity investment does come at a materially more dilutive term. It presents its own host of challenges. The value proposition of using debt has changed in general, and so that's definitely helped us. It really has spanned the entire supply chain for us, which is good, not just from a sense of serviceability and engaging different companies, but it also does give us a richer understanding of what the market in aggregate looks like, where you follow product from cultivation all the way down to dispensary level sales to the retail customer. I'd say in terms of what company would be a great fit or who, would stand to benefit from engaging with us, I'd say it's more about where your company is in its life cycle right now. We don't provide startup capital. We're not providing term loans that, will give you a credit facility for a 3 to 5 year term. For us, the ideal customers and the ideal clients are operators that have honed in on their area of expertise. They have a very narrowly defined set of goals and objectives as they're building out their business. They have their operational flow locked down. It's working effectively, but the only missing component is either additional working capital to allow them to really cycle and continue to grow, or it's that everything's working fine, but we want to grow and expand and just take advantage of other opportunities outside of, our known universe as of right now. I think debt just makes a very attractive offering in this space. And those are the kinds of companies where we can go in, underwrite their operations, understand it's a workable business, and then merely be the capital providers that enable them to continue their growth. I'd say it's two things. From a industry perspective, COVID obviously presents challenges across the board. It's hard to overstate the impact of basically entire economies just shutting down. No one expected this to happen. I think taking into consideration those challenges, but also the benefits that have come out of it, I think the state-sponsored carve-out of essential medicine, the fact that regulations are being relaxed, allowing product to be sold either delivery direct to the customer or curbside pickup, all of that is obviously a boon to the industry. It allows us to continue operating in a time when most other industries are shut down. And so for us, what we've actually seen is an uptake in activity in terms of companies reaching out. Obviously, capital markets are very stressed with the broader volatility that exists out there. We're definitely having a different quarantine experience than most other companies and people are, in the sense that if you're constantly busy, it does make the sort of day-to-day staying indoors much more bearable. The entire team is engaged more or less the entire day, and it's fairly easy to do that. It's not the same as being in one room and being able to turn around and engage with someone, but we haven't really felt that sort of limitation of having people be inaccessible or any of that. And I think, the fact that this is all happening when we have these tools and this ability to remain in contact is a huge win. So I think it was clear out of the gate, though, that cannabis was not included in the purview of that program. So we didn't really deal with too much inbound inquiry on that front. I think the essential medicine carve-out, obviously, it was a huge benefit to the industry. If anything, that just resulted in more companies approaching us because they fulfilled their POs for March. Halfway through March, most inventory sold out as, consumers just started squirreling away inventory in case they couldn't leave the house anymore. We didn't have the essential medicine carve-out. And so that's when we started seeing a more material uptake where companies basically said, look, all my product for this month is already out the door. I need to keep inventory on the shelves and I need capital in order to do that. And so it was more from a positive aspect of we need to scale up operations more than it was, all of our sales have dropped off a cliff and we've got burns to mitigate and we need capital in order to just survive. It's positive to see that state governments have really gone to bat for cannabis companies, regardless of whether you're talking about just California or any of the other recreational states. I think the vast majority have continued to support the industry, which makes sense. These are companies that add to employment. It's a growing industry. It'll be a new source of employment, new source of tax revenue. If anything's been the most disappointing, it's been that, as I moved into Bespoke to build out the company, obviously, anyone who started their own company, it's like having a new child, right? It's a new baby. It needs constant attention and constant focus. So I'd say in general, over the past 2 years, my cannabis consumption has taken a precipitous decline. It has become more of a luxury indulgence more than anything else. That being said, for me, I've always been, a fan of concentrates. I think it's cannabis for the modern era, quite honestly. It's just clean, it's convenient, it's easy to use. I'm continued to be amazed at the level of quality that the industry puts out there on a consistent basis. It's always just exciting to see companies doing new things, whether it's on the edible front or a new strain that you've heard of that, is getting rave reviews. When we initially launched the company, we had strictly focused on the California market. We continue to expect that'll be our main bread and butter going forward. In Q1 of 2020, we actually did branch out, and now we do offer our same financing to companies that are in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. We've already seen from last year into this a huge difference in the way a lot of these manufacturers and distributors are operating their business, whether it's terms extended to their vendors and or customers, or how they're managing their own internal workflow. So for us, as we continue through 2020 and quite honestly beyond, it's going to be this aspect of, making sure we understand what the needs of the industry are. I think what's keen is, as much as, you read the headlines and you hear about strains in the industry and sort of the collapse of some of these larger names that raised massive amounts of capital in the last sort of frothy equity market cycle. I think the important thing to note is, from an investor perspective, looking at the cannabis space, I'd say the haircuts to valuations and that retrenching of equity capital, I think net is going to be a boon to the cannabis industry. My one idea that I had was that if the broader market did ever go into a recessionary period, which we're obviously in right now, cannabis would stand to be sort of the diamond in the rough, because you have an industry that's new. It's got a loyal consumer base. It's got high forecasted growth rates. And now you have investment opportunities that are not, completely untethered to reality. And so that's what investors really need to see before they'll really come back into the space. It did hurt the industry, the fact that, this free money pool went away. I think in the long term, it does us a lot of benefit because you do start now getting smart investors that are coming in for the longer haul. As brutal as it was, I think it does position us in a place where people will actively start looking at this space because, where else do you invest in a recessionary environment? I think for any investors that are listening, I'd say, as much as the headlines are helpful and it's always interesting to read stories, I think the actual industry itself is comprised of a lot more participants that are doing very impressive things. And quite frankly, I've been very amazed in terms of just from looking at these companies that we have conversations with. And then conversely, for any cannabis operators that are out there listening, I would say my advice would be, as much as you should be focused on the day-to-day operations and solving problems, what we do find sometimes are that the finance and the closing of the books and all that stuff does kind of fall to the wayside, which is understandable given the challenges on a day-to-day basis. My advice would be, don't do that. And it's more so because, not just because it makes our lives easier when we're engaged with you, but it's also because, all this hard work that you're doing and all the success that you have, in order for you to capitalize on it and attract investment and attract good partners that want to work with you, you have to translate that story. And, your records and your books, that's how that story gets translated.